Hello, and welcome to another Website Depot podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Greg Benevent, and I'm very happy to be joined today by a very special guest, the CEO and managing partner of Best Studio Ever, Inc., Benjamin Alexander Hamilton. Benjamin, how you doing today?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
If you could just explain to the viewers, the listeners, just a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. As you said, my name Benjamin Alexander Hamilton. I'm the CEO of what's kind of a unique company. It's a lot different than what people are used to. We are a body piercing and tattoo chain. We have
Mm,
12 locations in 4 states,
mhm.
over 100 staff members. So we're a lot different than the typical situation that you would see.
Clearly, and that's a big reason that I asked Benjamin to be on the podcast today. Is that I know from some of our interactions is that, as Benjamin mentioned, he is different than so many others that you might see in this space and in many others. Benjamin said something that just utterly fascinated me in our emails. You talked about how you didn't want to be associated with the shock and awe in your industry. If you could talk a little bit about what that is, how you'd want to avoid that, and what that ultimately leads your business to.
Sure. Well, I mean, whenever you see tattooing portrayed in a movie or TV show, it's very typical of this kind of seedy back alley kind of thing. You
Mm.
know, it's nighttime, it's raining out, you got for some reason the guy's not wearing his shirt, it's scary. It's not cool for us because the industry has evolved a lot over the years. Particularly the piercing industry and those two industries have kind of evolved. They are grouped together, but they are two unique, different industries. And so having
Mm.
piercing and tattoo within a location is a really kind of a unique blend of two different ideologies and two different kind of completely autonomous industries that have evolved separately, but the same because it's lumped together. So we're in high end malls and some of the biggest malls in not us, but in the industry. You have people who are in like Dubai. You have people who are in what is that, Harold's shopping mall or whatever, that like the most prestigious places you can think of, and they're doing body piercing and sometimes tattooing as well. So it's evolved a lot. The experience has evolved a lot with it. So client experiences now, they come in, it's more like a boutique or a high-end salon is usually what I
Mm.
try to pitch it to prospective landlords. We're
Okay.
going for more of that kind of
Oh,
because
wow.
the jewelry has evolved significantly as well. People are coming in there and they could be spending, tickets used to be under $100. And sometimes we'll have studios that'll have ticket averages for the day that are $300 or $400. Sometimes people will drop thousands of dollars
Oh,
because it's high end gold. That's what they want, and that's what we want to cater to. So this is a much more affluent client base. It's a lot more wealthy. They know what they want. With tattoos, same thing. They've evolved to very, very high end, very large pieces. These aren't just the come in, pick a flash off the wall. This is custom designed drawings that you work with an artist for often months, years to make these giant, beautiful pieces, very elaborate. From what you see in TV and what you see in movies, we are distinctly different. And so when people are trying to do articles about that, we want to kind of differentiate and make sure we don't want to reinforce the stereotype.
okay. That makes so much sense. Because I was going to ask at some point, what are some misconceptions folks might have about your industry? And obviously, you covered all of those very well. It very struck by the part you said about not wanting to reinforce the stereotype, because that kind of feeds in to the other thing I wanted to ask you is that in our discussions on email, you'd mentioned about wanting to have positive interactions that were focused on growth and healing, and I could sense some of what you meant by that when you spoke of the higher end and the affluence and the gold and people knowing what they want in the boutique. If you could talk about exactly what that means, both in your industry and like in a modern business, about what it means to have to focus on those positive interactions about growth and healing, and what that really means and represents.
Well, people getting piercing and tattoos aren't always doing it for the aesthetic. And sometimes it's
Mm,
coupled with an aesthetic as an ultimate outcome, but it has a more deeper personal meaning for it. And studies and everybody who works within studios knows that people will oftentimes go to a studio to get a piercing or tattoo before they go to their therapist after a major traumatic event.
oh,
This
wow.
is about body reclamation. This can
Okay.
be a major turning point, a recognition milestone. People, we don't have a lot of those. And so
Not
when you're
really.
an 18-year-old and suddenly you have body autonomy and you can do decisions that your parents can't say no to, that is kind of a rite of passage in our culture where they go and they get
Yes.
their piercing and they get their tattoo. And so these are personal reasons that people are going to get these things done for. There's a need. They want something more than just the aesthetic of it. And it's up to us to be able to try to facilitate that and honor that in a respectful way where the client is heard, that they're respected, they're appreciated, and we do what we can to facilitate that need. Um, and you see it all the time. People,
Mm,
when they get the piercing, they get the tattoo, and they look in the mirror and they have this moment where they are just so proud of themselves and they are so happy. And they walk out into the lobby and they've got this different stance than they when they came in there. And it can be life changing. It can be
mm.
significant. And so, we really want to make sure that we honor that and we continue that because that's the product. That's what we're really selling.
Wow. Okay. It's funny as you were talking for the first time in many years, so many of my own friends that when they turned 18, when they turned 21, when they, got the job or had a child or something, they went out and got some kind of, like you mentioned, a tattoo or something like that. As something I bring up on this podcast, since so many of people that watch and listen are in business and I'm someone in therapy and I always try to get, to speak more to like, hey, check this out, give it a shot. That might be better for you. I mean, if you covered it already, you covered it. But I'm just fascinated by you talked about if you could go a little bit, you never would have thought of it that someone that goes to therapy or after a traumatic event or something in therapy, they get a body piercing or tattoo. If you could just talk a little bit more about that connection or about that, because that I didn't plan this at all, but that's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of different things too. It with tattoos, you often have memorial,
Mm,
and so that's a heavy thing. That's a lot to
yeah.
take on. I've talked to many of our artists about it, how that can be really hard. Actually, that's an emotional tattoo, especially if this is a person you've been working with for years. You've developed a relationship with them. They lose a significant person in their life, and they need to recognize it. And you can have people who are doing tattoos and they're crying.
Oh,
They're the
geez.
practitioner and
Wow.
they're crying with the client because it's a deeply spiritual moment.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's so fascinating. I never would have considered that, but you're so right. That's what the spiritual is just a perfect word, but what a moment of real human connection and vulnerability that is like that. Wow. Yeah, so that makes all the sense in the world, like you mentioned about growth and healing. That very much is that. It something else I wanted, and this kind of feeds into it. You mentioned the staff and how challenging that can be for a staff member and something that if you could talk a little bit about obviously there's very strong, deeply felt and exhibited values in your business and all that. If you could talk a little bit about having and acquiring a staff that exemplifies that, since like I said, a lot of folks listening to business folks themselves. You could talk a little bit about your staff, getting them how all that works there for you.
Well, what we want to make sure that we all have in common is a commitment to the client experience.
Mm,
And you can have some of the best tattoo artists, some of the best piercers in the world, and that's a subjective kind of thing.
sure.
But it really it has more to do with their personality and their commitment to that client experience. The people who are willing to listen and really hear the clients and work with them and give them what they're looking for or as close to it as they can. That's the important thing, and they need to work and do that with a team mentality. It's a group of people working together this goal, and people who are kind of me centric aren't really going to fit into that model. So we really want to make sure that we get team contributors who are looking out for the best interest of that experience.
So much sense. That makes so much sense. You've obviously been in industries for a long time, and you've probably seen so many changes. I mean, what are some of the changes that are maybe going on right now? Some, whether they're opportunities or challenges, and how you navigate and incorporate those. What are you seeing right now around this?
Well, the biggest talk in the town right now is private equity, you know.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
they've come in and they see an opportunity. Private equity
Hmm.
is known for seeing what they would consider a fractured market and the operations. So it's an
Hmm.
extraction model, right? So they're doing
Oh,
that
geez.
with the sole purpose of taking that money and giving it to investors, people who probably
Hmm.
already have enough money,
Right.
and taking it away from a community. And that's
Right.
what it is. It's a community.
Hmm.
And so you see a lot of these shops slowly being swooped up and taken out. And that's many of the owners, many of the industry folks, because these business models that they have aren't usually people first. They're not people first for the people first
Right.
for the,
Hmm.
this is a flashy, homogenized, really, their feeds are going to be what's the celebrity that they're working on, what's this,
Oh,
what's that,
geez.
and most of us who really care about the industry, we're more committed to really making sure that we hear each individual story and we meet their needs. So that's inherently against the ethos of who we are. And so the way we're combating it is we're
Hmm.
in the transition stage of we're in the second phase really of
Oh.
switching to an ESOP. So,
Oh, okay.
we did the exploratory phase, and now we're doing the paperwork stage, and
Great.
we'll be going in increments towards this model.
Fantastic. Wow. That's if you could talk just a little bit more about that, I think that is something unique that, as other industries change, as the economy is where it is, I'm not sure how many maybe business owners are aware of what all that entails or the benefits thereof. If you could talk a little bit more about, you said you've already made it through the first phase towards this. If you could go in just maybe a little bit more detail about this employee-owned model.
Well, you see employee-owned models pretty big across the country. Like Winco
Great.
is a really good example that a lot of people know about. I think there's this misconception that an ESOP is something that they do because of financial trouble and turmoil, but more common, it's a healthy company that switches to an ESOP model, usually because it's an owner that wants to transition away from ownership, and it's important to them that the legacy continues. It's
Mm.
important that the culture is still honored.
Hmm.
Obviously, when we talk about private equity or any kind of big business, the culture isn't usually a priority for them. That
Right.
it's more extraction models, right?
Mhm.
So the ESOP is a really good alternative to that, where you get to keep the culture and you get buy-in.
Mhm.
Everybody in the company is there as owners themselves. That's part of their retirement plan. And so there's a vested interest in the success of the company that you can't get any other way. And to me, it's about, you hear the saying, put your money where your mouth is. This is us putting our
Mm.
company where our mouth is, like what
Oh,
this
okay.
is us showing we're committed to this 100%, that we care about the legacy and
Mhm.
the future of our staff more than we care about getting paid.
Gotcha. Wow, that what a position against the idea of which is so much just grab whatever. Whereas you are building, as you've mentioned, this legacy, this culture. You said a few times in your culture and legacy and community. If and yours seems like such industries that are so centered around that. If you could talk a little bit about that, about having a business that as you mentioned, does have it as maybe on account of it balancing art and commerce, that there's such a little bit more about the community of your industry and what it's like being in a business that is so community centric.
Well, I mean, the piercing and tattoo community is really, tattoo. They're different than piercers, certainly.
Mhm.
But I think what we all have in common is that, well, for starters, a vast majority of us are neurospicy, as you might say. There are very few neurotypical members among our community. They're usually the
Hmm.
outliers, and most of us have our own idiosyncrasies and
Okay.
tendencies. And so there's that saying, "We're all here because we're not all there." It's a commonality, though. We've all
Mhm.
probably gone through trauma. We've sought
Mhm.
out the kind of a release for ourselves.
Mhm.
We we care about it more than just aesthetically,
Mm.
that there's a
Okay.
deeper meaning to it. There's a deeper sense of community there.
Mhm.
Most of us don't have great family lives that we grew up in, and this has been
Mm.
something that kind of the community has replaced that for us and given us a
Mm.
really good alternative to the abusive families that we probably left behind.
I was going to ask, how you got started in this, but I feel like you covered a lot of that there. I always end with two questions here. One of them, what do you see in the future? I mean, what's on the near horizon, the far horizon? What for either whether it's for Best Studio Ever, whether it's for you, whether it's for the industries, what's on the just beyond the horizon there?
Well, I mean, private equity isn't going to go away right away. Their
Okay.
business model is to acquire to a certain point and then sell out and for a profit. And when that happens, they can leave someone holding the bag. It's almost like a pyramid scheme, really. So whether or not what the damage that they've caused on the way up, it causes that part of the market to implode, we don't really know. I
Mhm.
think the biggest pitch that we would make as our entity and other entities similar to ours is that there is an alternative to private equity, that there are other business models out there. There are other people that you work with, other alternatives to that. We're kind of like, I mean, to make the Star Wars analogy, it's like we're individualistic folks who all working for the
Mhm.
common good, and versus the homogenized, very clean, uniform. It makes sense that it would come to this. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I just don't think that big business understands us individually. And I just
Mhm.
don't see it working because we are so unique. And, our business model is about compensation too. People first isn't just with the clients, it's also with our individuals. So we
Hmm.
pay people really well. And I know
Great.
that that doesn't typically fit into an extraction model.
No, and I am surprised that usually it's the host that makes the Star Wars reference before the guest. So that might be a new record on this podcast. The guest did it first, but no, that makes so much sense when you put it that way. And the last question I always ask is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to say? Is there anything that I haven't brought up that you would want to cover or would want to say to the listeners and viewers?
No, I appreciate you bringing me on here to talk about it. I
Mhm.
love talking
Mhm.
about this. I think that
Abs-
it's really interesting, and the more that I think people know about it, the more they'll probably want to know about it.
Certainly.
It's a fun industry with a lot of really committed individuals that care a lot about transformation and growth,
Hmm.
and that it's really important that we continue to honor the craft for its true value of what it gives to clients, and that self-actualization of becoming this better version of ourselves, not just metaphorically but physically. You and represent this different version of yourself. You're making the vision that you have in your head come to life, and that's really neat. We don't
Yeah.
in our society have a lot of opportunities for that, and this is one that still gets to exist, and we want to continue to honor it as it's meant to be.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's very well said. Thank you so much for coming on today, Benjamin. If you could tell the viewers and listeners where they could find you and where they could find Best Studio Ever.
Yeah, beststudioever.com. Pretty easy to
Hmm.
find us. We're in Seattle. Our entity up there is Deep Roots.
Hmm.
In Oregon, we're known as High Priestess. In San Francisco, we're 10 Tigers. In Costa Mesa, we're Barbella. And then finally in Arizona, in the Phoenix, Tempe area, we're known as HTC Studios.
Thank you so much. I could have talked to you at the end like this is when I talk about this, people were like, yes, yes, I do. That very much comes through. I wanted to know more about that at the end. That's great. Well, again, thank you so much for coming out. On behalf of everyone here at the company, my name is Greg Benevent. Take it easy. Have a good day.
Thank you.